Hello and good evening, one and all. Fáilteamh go léir an Anocht. You are very welcome to this Sinn Féin meeting. I am Mary Lou MacDonald and I'm joined by Piers Doherty and Louise O'Reilly. And the reason why we're having this meeting this evening, which by the way has been broadcast on Facebook, Twitter and on YouTube, is to discuss a very important matter that will come to the Dáil tomorrow. It relates to the Taoiseach and former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar TD. And it is a story about insiders. It's a story about bad practice. It's a story about bad government. It's a story about how Leo Varadkar, when Taoiseach, passed on a confidential draft contract to his friend. And I'm sure all of you have been following this story in the news. The facts aren't contested, they're established. Leo Varadkar accepts that it is the case that while Taoiseach, that he handed over this document to his friend. And I think the important thing to understand is that there had been a very long negotiation with an organisation called the IMO, the Irish Medical Organisation, which, as you know, represents doctors. And they negotiated a new contract for GPs all across the state. There was, however, another organisation, a rival organisation, who weren't involved in the negotiations, but the president of this other organisation was one of Leo Varadkar's friends. So in an act of, as far as I know, unparalleled, I've never heard of this happening before, that at the end game of a sensitive negotiation, and the contract, by the way, was worth 210 million taxpayers' euros, that this document was requested by Leo Varadkar's friend and handed over by the Taoiseach to that friend. Astonishing stuff, even by the standards of Irish politics, astonishing stuff. And this happened in April 2019. So it's in the recent past. Here's when Leo Varadkar came to the Dáil last Tuesday, you had questions for him, and he said to set out the reasons why and to give an account of his actions, but really his story didn't stack up, did it?
No, all his defences one by one just collapsed on the floor of the Dáil. He tried to spin a yarn, to tell a tale that this was some type of master plan of his, that he wanted to unite all the GPs, that he wanted to bring the other union on board. But actually, we all know now, and he's had to admit this, that this wasn't something that he instigated. It was his friend that asked for this confidential document, and his friend asked him after trying to get it from the Minister for Health, the minister who was directly responsible for the negotiations, and who refused to give him that document. But he went to Leo, and Leo stuck it in an envelope and sent it not to his head office, which is on the same street as Leinster House, but actually sought out his home address and sent it to his home address, telling not a sinner in the Department of Taoiseach Health, HSE, IMO, you name it, nobody was informed that Leo Varadkar was doing this. The second thing he tried to suggest is that this was a public document, nothing to see here and all the rest. If that was the case, then why did he go to such an effort to kind of capture it? But we actually know that there was substantial changes made to the document. I think from our browsing of both documents, it's 35 changes. And look, Leo Varadkar in his own handwriting wrote on this document that he posted to his friend, the rival organisation, said, subject to amendment and stroke change. So he knew it was open to change, and change it did actually happen during that period. And then the last kind of piece of defence, Mary Lou, he had was, well, this is a government commitment to keep the NAGB on board and to keep them engaged and keep them updated throughout this process. And look, you would think that that's okay. They were on the record of saying that. But actually, when we questioned him, how many engagements was there between the Department of the Health and the NAG over that year period? The answer is zero. There was no engagement whatsoever. The only engagement actually with them was when Leo Varadkar took a confidential document on the front cover, and every one of the 130 pages covers it says confidential, not for circulation, and he decided without telling anybody give it to his friend who was the rival organisation to who the state were negotiating with. And that's how Leo Varadkar has really left himself very, very exposed. And even people in other political parties, government parties, are saying that what he came up with was a type of fairy tale on the floor of the Dáil.
So yeah, it's extraordinary stuff. And of course, his friend's organisation, the NAGP, not to be confused with the IMO, they were really, really deadly rivals, weren't they, Pierce? And I mean, they were in competition with each other for members, for subscriptions, but above all else for influence. Isn't that really the significance of the document?
Yeah, look, anybody
needed that document to actually advance his own organisation. Isn't that true?
Yeah, look, and that's key. Like, if you're a representative body, you need to be in the circle, you need to have information, you need to be able to show your members that, it's willing, and there's a reason that you part with your hard-earned cash to pay your subscription fee to the NAGP, and that's because they had access to government, they had access to information. The problem was, at this point, they had no access. They were outside of the talks. They didn't know what was happening, but lo and behold, as I said, Leo Varadkar comes to their rescue, and this was even acknowledged by the NAGP at the end of that month, where they said that a large number of members are withholding their subscriptions because they wanted to see what was in this contract. So this was hugely valuable to the NAGP. When the NAGP got this document, Mary Lou, we know what they plan to do with it, because some of those conversations have been made public. They said that they wanted to undermine the IMO. That's the body that the state were negotiating in good faith for many, many months. Indeed, Leo's friend said he wanted to destroy the IMO. So take that as you will, but that's the type of intense rivalry that was going on.
So that's quite something, Louise. Before you were the TD and representative for Fingal, Dublin Fingal, I mean, your bread and butter has been negotiations, and you're a very experienced trade unionist. I mean, you've been in and out of government buildings and in pay talks. Just for our viewers, just to explain, I mean, trust is absolutely key, isn't it?
Without trust. Yeah. Without trust, there can be no negotiation. That's the absolute bottom line. So when you are at that level, and I was myself a member of the Public Services Committee for, I think, 8, maybe 9 years, when you're at that level and you are talking to very senior civil servants, and in some instances to ministers, you have to have trust. You have to know that the documents that you exchange are not going to be shared with another party, much less a rival organisation that had, as Pierce has outlined, they were excluded from those discussions. The government were not talking to them, and they were desperate to get their hands on this document. They had gone to the Minister for Health, they couldn't get it, and so they decided, Leo's friend asked for it, and he was sent it, which, I find absolutely incredible, because when you're sitting across the table from these people, and as you rightly point out, Mary Lou, I was in and out of government buildings for national pay talks on many occasions. Trust is absolutely everything. Without trust, you can't make progress in the negotiations, because you need to be able to share documentation, and you need to have trust when you are at that level. It's absolutely imperative.
The other thing, of course, is that what we see from what was published in the Village magazine, and which some of which has been contested, but the facts of this story are absolutely bang on and are accurate, and Leo Varadkar has confirmed this. But his friend says, Leo's always helpful. He always delivers. Which, Pierce, raises the question for all of us, and I think this is at the root of the thing, is that still, despite all of the kind of talk about change, and from the last election, Fine Gael in particular said, we understand people want change. Fianna Fáil said people want change, but there hasn't been any change. It seems that it's business as usual for these guys.
Yeah, and that's what's at the very core of this here. And people who are following this story now for well over a week, it's not about a document that was confidential being passed to a friend. That's part of the story. But the bigger part of the story is it's about the insiders. It's about those who have the track, those who always have the ear in the corridors of power, and those who are always left behind. It's why we look today and still see rents increasing in the middle of a pandemic. It's why we see, privatized health and the two-tier system, despite everybody saying we want a single universal healthcare system. It's why we have that type of for-profit motive in housing and all the challenges and issues that brings. It's because there's insiders, and you can see it. I see it in my own role as finance spokesperson. We would have been challenging Leo Varadkar recently in relation to mortgage breaks and interest that was being charged by banks, and they didn't have to do this, but that was putting additional pressure on people who lost their jobs during the pandemic. And Leo Varadkar says, "Oh, well, I don't understand this." He says it's gobbledygook, they talk. Now, the person he's talking to across the table is Brian Hayes. This is a former Fine Gael junior finance minister. This is another one of the insiders. This is another one of his friends. When we challenged him robustly in the Dáil, he said he will make sure that the banks are not profiting about this here. We got the minutes of that meeting. There was no challenge of the banks when they did the second meeting. No challenge whatsoever, because that shows you, Mary Lou, what happens here. There is an insider, and that is why this is crucial that this motion is put down. And while Micheál Martin won't act, by God, we will act, because that type of golden circle insider track, the change that people voted for, isn't that type of politics. They want something new, and you can see it with Michael Darcy as well. Just recently, you have Michael Darcy being appointed as chairperson of the funds industry. What does Leo Varadkar do as Taoiseach? He welcomes it. He actually says that isn't it great that the funds industry has him? This is somebody who was responsible for regulating these funds just a number of months before that, and actually isn't allowed to be part of a group that would lobby his former department. And it just shows you again the type of acceptance within that Fine Gael club of the insiders and the rest of us. And that's why that has to be challenged, and that's what's really at the heart of this story.
Yeah, it really is a story of jobs for the boys and these Fine Gael friends who we seem to be dotted everywhere. Some people, I saw some commentators saying, what's this? What is Sinn Féin at? Because, what's this got to do with the price of a sliced pan, or, with the bread and butter issues that working people and families face? But it's got everything to do with it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think when we see the crisis that we have in health, the absolute crisis that we have in housing, and we see, how there is a lack of political accountability, as Pierce has just said, Micheál Martin has no interest in holding Leo Varadkar to account, but that doesn't mean that he shouldn't be held to account. That absolutely means he should be held to account. And when we look at the fact that there is an insiders club, it's not a case of what you know, it is a case of who you know. So, for example, if you're one of the Debenhams workers, you don't get to just text the leader of Fine Gael and ask him, would he mind doing you a favour? You don't get to do that. You're on the outside. Whereas if you're in the club and you have the phone number, you can get the access, you can get the information that you need, and you can get it on the basis of who your friend is, not on the basis that it's more important, because I can tell you that the workers in Debenhams and their struggle is very, very important. It is most definitely one of the bread and butter issues that we should be discussing. But instead, you see, if you're on the inside, if you're in the club, you have the right phone numbers. If you're on the outside, you get left behind. And that's unfortunately what happens. That's not what people voted for last February. People voted for a different kind of politics. And when we see the same old, the old guard of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, we're not going to get change out of those parties. The change that people voted for won't come from those parties. In actual fact, there has to be a change within the political system, and that has to have accountability at its heart. So it very, very, very much is one of the bread and butter issues. In fact, it is one of the most important issues that we have to tackle as a party, and that's why we're putting down the motion of no confidence, because it is important. Accountability is important to Sinn Féin, even if it's not important to Fine Gael.
I mean, one of the other things that struck me really forcibly, because we all know the huge public anger and hurt that was caused at the suggestion by the Minister for Children that the files from the mother and baby home were going to be locked away and that people mightn't have access to their own files. I mean, extraordinary. The minister said again and again and again that these files had to be sealed and so on. Thankfully, they've realised that the law has to prevail and that people have an entitlement to their own information. But I don't think I'm the only person who was struck by the contrast of a government that on the one hand says to survivors of state, institutions overseen by the state, these mother and baby homes where people suffered so badly that there was a problem with them getting their own information. And then we find out the week later that the person in the highest political office in the land handed over confidential information to a friend who had no entitlement to that information. I mean, for me, that is just the most stark example of kind of the two Irelands, the two standards, insiders and outsiders, people in the loop and people outside. And Piers, I don't know. I mean, you talked about the banks there. I mean, we're how many weeks now into level 5? Are we 3 weeks in now to these new restrictions, and things are hard. And we were very concerned about mortgage holders losing the breaks that they had. And we said, and you in particular, Piers, you said to the government, get the banks in, go and talk to them, sort this out. I know, because I was at some of the meetings with you, that for weeks and months you had been working on this, but they did nothing. Tell me this much, have they had the banks in yet?
Yeah, they've had them in, but they've basically just had that kind of cozy chat over Zoom, and we follow up with the minutes to see what's going on, and it's not robust, it's not challenging, and all the rest. And the reality was, Mary Lou, they had no intention of trying to offer mortgage breaks extensions for people who have lost their jobs during the pandemic. It's actually, bizarre. Like, I'm living here in Donegal, and you could be a customer in Lifford of Bank of Ireland and you can't get a mortgage break if you've lost your job. But in Strabane, you can be a customer of Bank of Ireland or indeed Ulster Bank and get the mortgage break for 6 months. And you can still get that today, and you can still get it tomorrow or the next day and for the next number of months. Why? Because a different government has decided that's in the best interest of their representatives. Here, even though we own a large share of the banks, this government here, Leo Varadkar, Pascal Donoghue, have sat down again with the insiders, with their own friends and all the rest, and decided that's not in the interest of mortgage holders. And I, for one, don't understand it. And I know that there's a lot of people that are really, really struggling now and could do with that mortgage break, but it's not available to them. And if they take a break now, their credit's going to be affected. They will worry about whether they'll be able to get loans for their children going to college in the future, or maybe a new car, or even something very minor like some household appliance actually breaking down. But look, that's not the only example. That's where they failed to do the right thing. Here's an example of where they actually went out of their way to do the wrong thing. After a huge amount of time, we were able to force the government to bring forward insurance reform. This is really, really important. One of the biggest radical shake-ups in terms of insurance, and we've been leading the relation to ending the rip-off of insurance customers. We got the legislation through. It went past last December, signed into law by the president. What did Pascal Donoghue do? In his own words, he met with the insurance industry. The insurance industry said, could you delay the key parts of this legislation? And he says, okay. So it's not going to come into effect until September 2021. Now, that shows you the insiders in action. Actually, that just shows you how brazen they are, that they will actually tell you that actually the industry, which is ripping people off, which has been investigated numerous times because of cartel-like activity, yet the Minister for Finance is basically, in my view, just a puppet of that industry, because if you were standing up for ordinary people, you wouldn't delay this type of legislation. If you were standing up for ordinary people, you would take this industry to heel and you would end the rip-off practices.
And I mean, do you know the way carers and citizens with disabilities and their families and their advocates tell us time and again how left out they feel, how left behind they feel? And I know others in our society feel that way as well. But for me, that's one section of the population, Louise, that will tell you outright that they've been left behind. And I mean, my strong view is that is because we have a politics and a system and parties, Fine Gael, who behave in this way, who put a premium on these kind of networks of tight cliques almost of people, and then citizens really, really doing brilliant work and really doing their best just get forgotten, don't they? I mean, it's...
Well, that's what carers will tell you, Mary Lou. That's what they'll say to you. And that's why they're really angry about this. Because what they'll say is, my God, I wish I had, Leo Varadkar's phone number. I wish I could pick up the phone to the leader of Fine Gael and ask him for a favour and he'd deliver for me. Because, we saw that in the text messages. Leo always delivers. He does not deliver for carers, for people who are at home all during this pandemic with their services stopped. For public health reasons, we know, but they felt like they were left out, they were forgotten. And they look at this and they see what happens in our health service every day of the week, the creeping privatisation, the fact that they get pushed further and further down the agenda, the fact that, a couple of years ago, they might have had 2 weeks respite, then it goes down to a week. Now they're lucky if they're getting even that week in a year, and they're absolutely desperate. So what they will say to you very much is, yes, there's 2 Irelands. There's one Ireland for the people that have the right phone numbers and the people on the inside who can pick up the phone or drop a text message or a WhatsApp message, and they can get delivery from government. And then there's a very, very other Ireland, but for those people who are effectively locked out. And I think those people need to be brought into politics. They're the very, very people that need to be listened to and need to be heard. They're the people who should be at the heart of the body politic instead of stuck on the outside. They're the people who we should be talking to. They're the people who Sinn Féin do talk to. They're the people who should be exerting an influence over this government. And unfortunately, what we have is a club of insiders and outsiders, and our carers and the people who are literally the backbone. As I always say, if carers in the state were to decide to go on strike for half a day, it would have a massive impact. But they keep going. They keep doing what they're doing. They keep looking after their loved ones. They keep the show on the road, and then they open the pages of the newspaper or they turn on the television in the evening and they see again why they have been left out, why they have been left behind, because Fine Gael simply are not interested in them and not interested in bringing them into the Insiders Club. They're happy. Fine Gael are happy for them to be on the outside, and I think that's wrong. I think that's really fundamentally wrong. And when you talk to carers, they will tell you that is why they're angry at what they see. It's not about a document. It's not about a WhatsApp message. It is about a system that excludes those people who desperately need to be on the inside. It's about a system that is contrived to keep them on the outside, and it's not right.
I mean, I'm always mindful of, for example, childcare workers. I mean, they came onto the streets in their thousands in advance of the last election. We all know, because we know the service and the support that they provide. Highly qualified professionals, paid a pittance, services under huge pressure. We see student nurses now at the front line. I mean, literally at the front line of COVID-19, not being paid. Today is Equal Pay Day, ladies and gentlemen. There is a gender pay gap. Believe me, it's real. It's out there. Low pay is also a reality, and it's equal opportunities for men and women. I know that as well. But in this case, you have people working who are getting no pay. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that hasn't worked. And then you look on and you see this, that the Taoiseach hands over a confidential document to his friend. Now, Louise, I said earlier that you're an experienced trade unionist, and no better woman than you to fight anyone's corner. I have to say that. But tell me this much: if a civil servant, a public servant, anyone in their job did that, what would happen? Would they be sacked?
Oh, they would be subject to very, very severe disciplinary procedures. Absolutely, they would, because that kind of documentation does not get flung around. That kind of documentation is kept to a very, very strict number of people. That kind of documentation, there is a reason why it had stamped all over it, confidential and not for circulation. So anybody who failed to adhere to the standards that would be expected in terms of maintaining that confidentiality, that person would be in serious trouble. Absolutely, they would. But again, we see this, if you're if you're Leo Varadkar, if you're the leader of Fine Gael, you know, you can be held maybe to a lower standard than the person who would be working in his office, and I think that that's really wrong. But you know, again, it's about accountability, and it's about standards. It's about holding the government to a high standard, because they should be, you know, because we should be able to expect that high standard. And you referenced there the Low Pay Commission. I don't think it's going to be lost on anyone who's watching this tonight. You know, people on low incomes, people on the minimum wage were awarded 10 cent by the government, 10 cent an hour, a 10 cent an hour increase, while we know that TDs, not in Sinn Féin, but other TDs are accepting a pay increase that's worth several thousand to them. So again, it's a tale of two Irelands, a tale of upstairs and downstairs, and I think that's what people want to see challenged. You know, that's what where people want to see action. They don't want this insiders and outsiders, upstairs and downstairs. They want to see a level playing field, and you'll only get that when you have a government that's going to be on your side instead of on the side of the insiders and the small elite club.
And Piers, doesn't look like Micheál Martin is going to do anything.
Well, surprise there, Mary Lou, with Micheál Martin, despite the fact that some of his own deputies are saying that it's not credible, that it's fairy tale stuff. You know, look, at the end of the day, he is Taoiseach. He should hold those responsible to account. He's failing to do that, and that's why, you know, we won't work to that standard. There has to be proper accountability in terms of politics. And, you know, I think Louise said something that kind of struck a chord there with me, Mary Lou, and it's about a government that's on your side. And that really sums up everything that we're talking about here, because this is the question. And this is where, you know, Leo Varadkar's got caught. He's caught out. He's red-handed. You know, he's absolutely, you know, caught out completely. Not only did he give this, in my view, he covered his tracks. He deleted the communication between himself and his friend in relation to passing and seeking the document, which he's supposed to actually send to his official email, because all of this is supposed to be subject to freedom of information. The reason we have freedom of information is because we believe in transparency and shining a light in government, so that things that happened in the past, like a former Fine Gael minister who was involved in dealings with Dennis O'Brien and led to the Moriarty Tribunal and all that, that's supposed to be in the past. But the reality is it's not. The reality is we do not have a government who is on the side of ordinary people. And we just listened here to, you know, talking about carers, parents with disabilities, children with disabilities, you know, our people on the minimum wage, all of those, the survivors of the mother and baby homes, the fight, the battle that they had to put up for something that was their legal right. And if it wasn't for that battle that those advocates, those heroes actually waged, we'd be still in this situation, I believe, where the government would be sticking to this idea that your personal records are sealed for 30 years. That is not a government that's on the side of ordinary people. This is a government that's on the side, and we have the evidence to show it. The people who are connected, your friends in high places, bankers, insurance industry, lobbyists. That's unfortunately the government that we have. And that's why it's so important that we actually do not allow what Fianna Fáil and what the Greens, unfortunately, are trying to do is brush this under the carpet and say nothing to see here. As Louise said, if this happened in any other rank in the civil servants, it would be deemed as gross misconduct, the misuse of confidential information, and is subject to lose and termination. That's exactly what should happen to Leo Varadkar. He has to be held to account the same way that he would hold himself, any person working in his office, to account for the same issue.
So that's it, folks. That's what's happened. This is where we are. All of you who voted for us, who support us, who we represent, and others, people beyond that, we said in February that it cannot be simply business as usual. I mean, you remember me saying the ideal thing is to have government without either Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. You remember that? And I said also the worst outcome would be Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in government together. And that's what we see now. And I have to tell you, I am angry about this, not because it's some kind of technical issue, because it's not. I know for sure, for absolute sure, that for so long as that kind of politics continues, we're not sorting out housing and we're not sorting out health. In fact, I believe those parties in government kept change out very deliberately. And now they believe that it's business as usual, that Fine Gael can behave as Fine Gael behaves. And you have the insiders and outsiders, as Louise and Pierce have said. In February, during that election campaign, we set out the solutions that Ireland needs to the core issues for pension rights, for housing, for health, for decent work, and so many other things. And we are determined that that work will get done. So if Micheál Martin decides that he's not going to act, that's for him to explain. But as leaders of the opposition, we will do our job and we will keep our word to you. And our word was that change is possible, the change is necessary, and the change will be delivered. And that's where we're at, friends. We're not backing down from that. And tomorrow in the Dáil, the debate will happen. I think it's kicking off at about 5:15 in the evening. It'll go on for approximately 2 hours. It'll be covered on all our social media platforms. So tune in and be sure you know what's going on. Give us your views, give us your feedback. But this now is a battle for Ireland and for Irish political life. And you see the golden circles, or whatever you want to call them, that day is over. That politics stops, and it stops now. And Sinn Féin, as your representatives, will make that stand for you, the working people, the decent people, the carers, the teachers, the nurses, the farmers, the people who haven't seen a day's work since March because of this pandemic. People who are struggling with their rent, people who can't draw down their mortgages or can't make their mortgages. All of you, the reason that this motion and that we have taken this stand is for you. This isn't a technical issue. This isn't a political bubble issue. This is a people issue. This is a fairness issue. And this is an issue about change prevailing, and prevail it will. So thanks a million for being with us this evening. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Pierce, as ever. And keep in touch. Slán live, Anish.